In America today, money seems to have lost its magic. We earn higher salaries, have more choices, and live with smarter technology. Yet, we're more anxious than ever before. People in their 30s wonder, will I ever be able to afford a home? Those in their 40s worry, what will happen to my family if I lose my job? And those in their 60s, thinking about retirement, quietly calculate whether their savings will last if they live to 90. This isn't just about money. It's about how we think about money. Laurence Kotlikoff, an economics professor in Boston, realized that most Americans, smart, educated, and hardworking, are all making the same mistake. They measure wealth by the number in their bank account, not by the quality of life that money truly brings. He calls it the reverse magic of money, the illusion that we're controlling our money when in fact, money is the one controlling us. After more than 40 years of research in personal finance, Kotlikoff wrote Money Magic, a book that breaks the so-called unbreakable rules, that long-term investing always wins, that buying a home is always wise, and that retiring early means you've made it. He doesn't promise to make you rich. He simply wants to help you live smarter with the money you already have. Because, as he puts it, money is only magic when you understand what it's truly working for. Part 1. Living Standard, the true measure of wealth. Laurence Kotlikoff opens Money Magic with a question that catches many people off guard. Do you actually know how wealthy you are? He's not talking about the number in your bank account or the market value of your home, because as he explains, wealth isn't measured by your assets. It's measured by the living standard you can sustain throughout your life. Kotlikoff calls this the living standard, the only measure that truly reflects how you live, not how rich you appear to live. He tells the story of two men living in the same Boston suburb. Both earn around $150,000 a year. The first spends freely, a big house, a new car, luxury vacations, and an investment portfolio full of stocks. The second lives more simply, a smaller home, less debt, and spends more time learning, investing in his kids, and taking care of his health. They're the same age, have the same job, and started from the same place. But 10 years later, the first man is drowning in debt, while the second lives comfortably and ready for retirement. Kotlikoff explains, they didn't differ in how much they earned. They differed in how they understood their own living standard. Because the money you have today, if it doesn't translate into a sustainable living standard, is just an illusion of wealth. That's the mistake most Americans make. We call ourselves rich when our salary goes up, when our portfolio grows, or when our home value rises. But few ever ask, can I sustain this lifestyle for the rest of my life? If I lose my job for 6 months, will everything fall apart? Kotlikoff points out that every financial decision, from your career and home choices to marriage and retirement, directly affects your living standard. And most of us make those decisions without truly understanding their real cost. He gives the example of early retirement. Many believe that reaching financial freedom at 55 means success, but Kotlikoff shows that if you retire 10 years earlier, you don't just lose 10 years of income, you also have 10 extra years of spending to fund. The result? Your average living standard could drop by 30 to 40%. The question isn't how much money you have, it's how long you can sustain the life you want to live. This is what he calls the living standard mindset, viewing every financial number through the lens of your lifetime lifestyle. For Kotlikoff, saving isn't just about accumulating wealth, it's about buying back your future. Investing isn't just about returns, it's about preserving the quality of life you deserve. And spending isn't just about using money, it's how you express what truly matters to you. Someone who understands their living standard doesn't chase after being richer than others. They only need to know they have enough to live in alignment with their own values. That's why, as Kotlikoff says, real wealth begins with awareness in every decision you make. And perhaps the moment you pause to ask yourself, how am I living, not just how much am I earning, you've already stepped into the world of money magic.
Part 2. Career and Lifetime Earnings. Laurence Kotlikoff holds a view that sharply contrasts with most traditional financial experts. He says that your biggest investment isn't in the stock market, it's in your career. It sounds simple, but if you look closely, it's one of the truths most people overlook. We spend countless hours researching stocks, ETFs, or interest rates, but rarely do we invest the same time and effort in optimizing our lifetime earnings, what Kotlikoff calls lifetime income. He tells the story of a woman named Sarah, a 34-year-old marketing professional. She earned about $90,000 a year and felt financially stable. But when Kotlikoff helped her model her lifetime earnings, he discovered something eye-opening. If she learned one advanced skill, shifted towards data analytics, and moved into the tech industry, her lifetime income could increase by over $1.2 million, a gain no investment fund could ever deliver at such low risk. Investing in yourself is always the highest return investment. We just don't see it on our balance sheets. According to Kotlikoff, every person has two kinds of assets: financial assets and human capital. Financial assets are your money, stocks, and property. Human capital is your skills, knowledge, health, and your capacity to earn in the future. If you know how to manage your human capital, you'll build a stronger financial foundation than any investment portfolio could offer. The problem is, many Americans treat their careers as a short-term income stream, not as a long-term asset. They choose jobs for the paycheck and ignore opportunities to grow, learn, or build meaningful relationships. They invest in Apple stock, but not in the skills that could get them promoted inside their own company. Kotlikoff calls this the quiet leak of lifetime wealth, the silent drain that happens every day we stop learning and stop growing. He also warns that many people mistake changing jobs for risk, when in reality, it can be the smartest reinvestment in yourself. If your current job no longer helps you grow, then staying might actually be the real risk. A career isn't a path, it's a portfolio. Every career decision is an investment in your future self. Another fascinating idea from Kotlikoff's work is how he treats career choice as a balancing act between lifetime income and quality of life. A high-paying job that leaves you exhausted or unhealthy might lower your real living standard compared to a simpler job that gives joy, energy, and peace of mind. He reminds us, a great career is one that lets you sustain both your income and your vitality long enough to actually enjoy the money you earn. In an era where AI and automation are redefining what work means, Kotlikoff believes that lifetime investing is no longer about accumulating assets. It's about continuously reinventing your own value, because adaptability is the strongest currency of the 21st century. And once you realize that your career itself is your greatest asset, you begin to think differently. Each skill you learn is a share of stock. Each relationship you build is a long-term investment. And every time you step outside your comfort zone, you're revaluing the biggest portfolio you'll ever own, yourself.
Part 3. Major life decisions: marriage, divorce, home, and student debt. Laurence Kotlikoff has a refreshingly blunt, almost brutally honest way of talking about life's biggest financial choices. He believes that most Americans don't go broke because they spend recklessly, but because they make the wrong decisions at the most critical moments of their lives. Marriage, divorce, buying a home, taking out student loans. 4 decisions that seem deeply personal, yet they're actually the 4 biggest financial transactions most people will ever make. Kotlikoff tells the story of Mark and Julie, a couple from Texas. Both had stable jobs and good incomes, and they assumed marriage would help them save more. But when Kotlikoff ran the numbers through his tax and Social Security analysis software, he uncovered a surprise. Under the current tax system, they were actually losing more than $20,000 a year, simply because they were married. Not because they did anything wrong, but because U.S. tax and benefit policies often penalize couples with similar earnings. Kotlikoff isn't telling people not to marry. He just wants them to understand that love is emotional, but marriage is also an economic contract. And when you enter it without understanding the financial rules of the game, you're gambling your future on blind faith. Then comes divorce, what Kotlikoff calls the single biggest negative investment a person can make. He's not talking about emotions, but the financial aftermath: legal fees, taxes, insurance, asset division, lifestyle changes, all of which can turn 2 financially stable people into 2 struggling individuals within a few short years. He often reminds readers, money can't save a bad marriage, but ignorance about money can destroy a good one. That's why Kotlikoff urges couples to treat joint financial management as a core part of marriage, not as something unromantic. Then there's home ownership, the symbol of the American dream. Kotlikoff argues that today, that dream is keeping more people awake at night than ever before. He points out that buying a home isn't always a smart investment, especially when people buy with emotion instead of math. He tells the story of a young couple in California who took out a $700,000 mortgage to buy their dream home, believing that real estate prices always go up. 3 years later, interest rates rose, property taxes climbed, and their dream home became a financial shackle, one that kept them trapped in jobs they hated. Kotlikoff isn't saying don't buy a house. He's saying don't let the place you live become the place that imprisons you. A home is only a true asset if it makes you freer, not if it drains your energy and locks away your flexibility. And then there's student debt, what Kotlikoff calls the most dangerous investment in your future if you don't calculate it carefully. He once advised a student named Lisa, 22, who was considering borrowing $120,000 for a master's degree in communications. When Kotlikoff ran her lifetime income simulation, he showed her that even in the best-case scenario, it would take her more than 20 years to pay off the loans, and the real value of that education, after inflation, would actually be negative $50,000. So Lisa chose a shorter, cheaper program and entered the workforce sooner. A less glamorous choice, but one that helped her reach financial freedom 10 years earlier. Through all these stories, Kotlikoff doesn't aim to make us fearful. He wants us to wake up. Because, as he says, most of us are trapped in a social financial illusion, believing that marriage, home ownership, and higher education are always the right moves simply because everyone else does them. But the truth is, no financial decision is right, unless it's right for your life. And perhaps the greatest lesson he offers is this: money doesn't define life's biggest decisions, but if you leave it out of the equation, it'll be the first thing you regret.
Part 4. Social Security, Retirement, and Financial Longevity. Laurence Kotlikoff once said, "The question isn't how long you live, it's whether your money can live long enough with you." It's a gentle statement, but a deeply sobering one, because in today's America, millions of people are preparing for retirement with more anxiety than peace of mind. With over 40 years of research in retirement economics, Kotlikoff has uncovered something alarming. Most Americans completely misunderstand the real value of Social Security, not because they don't care, but because they don't understand how to activate it strategically. He tells the story of John, a 62-year-old engineer who proudly believed he had done the math. John planned to start collecting benefits as soon as he was eligible, fearing that if he waited too long, he might not live long enough to enjoy them. But Kotlikoff showed him a different equation, that if John waited until age 70, his Social Security payments would be 76% higher than if he claimed early. And because the average American man now lives well into his 80s, John wouldn't just live to collect, he'd live better for the rest of his life. Kotlikoff calls this the art of financial timing, a single decision that can make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars simply by understanding and respecting the power of time. Yet most people remain trapped in a mindset of fear of market crashes, fear of inflation, fear of outliving their savings. And it's that fear, not the economy, that drives them to harvest money before it's ripe. Money is like fruit. Pick it too early, and all you'll taste is sourness. Another key idea in money magic is maximizing financial longevity. Kotlikoff argues that the goal isn't to retire as early as possible, but to retire as sustainably as possible. In the 21st century, life expectancy is no longer 70, it's 90, sometimes even 100. That means a 60-year-old today might need to finance 40 years without a paycheck. And that's a challenge that saving alone can't solve. You have to understand how the system works and make decisions that align with your lifetime horizon. Kotlikoff explains that Social Security isn't just government money. It's a risk-sharing system, a way to convert longevity risk into lasting security. But if you claim it at the wrong time, you're essentially burning hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own benefits, all because of impatience. He shares another story about Linda, a nurse who had worked for 35 years. She planned to retire at 65, but after running simulations with Kotlikoff's software, she realized that if she worked just 3 more years and delayed her Social Security until 68, she'd gain nearly $300,000 in lifetime income. Not because she earned more, but because she timed it smarter. Kotlikoff believes that retirement isn't a destination, it's the next chapter in managing life's risks. He urges people not to think of retirement as quitting work, but as redirecting your energy. You may stop earning a paycheck, but you should never stop making intelligent financial decisions. The real price of freedom isn't how much money you have, it's how well you understand how to use it to extend your happiness. And if one image could capture Kotlikoff's philosophy, it would be this: a person rowing across a calm lake. You don't need to row the fastest. You just need to row wisely enough to keep from running aground in the long journey ahead.
Part 5. Investing and Risk. Breaking the Old Rules. Turn on any financial channel in America, and you'll hear the same familiar lines. The market always goes up in the long run. Diversify your portfolio. Don't try to time the market. They sound right, and for the most part they are. But as Laurence Kotlikoff warns, they're right until they're not. He once shared a story about David, a 55-year-old engineer in Boston. David had read dozens of investing books, maxed out his 401k, bought S&P 500 index funds, and proudly believed he was doing everything by the book. Then Kotlikoff asked him, if the market dropped 40% the year you planned to retire, what would you do? David went silent, because even though he had invested smartly, he had never invested to survive. Kotlikoff isn't against investing. He's against the illusion that most investors live under. The illusion that risk can be captured by numbers, that a financial chart can predict the future. He writes, We don't live in an Excel spreadsheet. We live in a world full of real people with emotions, panic, and fear-driven decisions. That's why he pushes back against the old mantra of buy and hold forever. In his view, that strategy only works for people with infinite time and unshakable nerves. Two things almost no one has in real life. Instead, Kotlikoff promotes a different mindset: probability thinking instead of belief-based thinking. You can't know what will happen, but you can design your finances so that even if the worst happens, you'll still have enough to live on. He recalls the 2008 financial crisis, when millions of Americans lost most of their retirement savings in just months. Many weren't ruined because they invested poorly, but because they never understood their personal risk limits. They thought they had a long-term mindset until they woke up every morning staring at red numbers on their account screen. Kotlikoff calls this emotional risk. It doesn't appear on a graph, but it can destroy more wealth and peace than any market crash ever could. He says if you're losing sleep over your money, that's no longer investing. That's self-inflicted torture. Rather than teaching people how to beat the market, Kotlikoff teaches them to make peace with reality, to understand why they're investing and where their tolerance for pain truly ends. He says the ideal portfolio isn't the one with the highest returns. It's the one that keeps you calm when everything goes wrong. A 40-year-old with a mortgage and 2 kids can't and shouldn't invest like a 25-year-old with no obligations. But most people still cling to the same cookie-cutter advice. Just leave your money there, the market always comes back. To which Kotlikoff replies, yes, the market always recovers, but you don't always have enough time to wait. And perhaps his most powerful idea can be summed up in one sentence. Investing isn't about proving you're right. It's about ensuring you can still live well even when you're wrong. That, Kotlikoff says, is the most realistic and the most deeply human definition of investing. Because in the end, the goal isn't to beat the market. It's to keep your freedom, your peace, and your dignity intact in a world where money and uncertainty never stop moving.
Part 6: Housing, Debt, and the Standard of Living. In America, the phrase "home sweet home" still symbolizes the dream. A house with a green lawn, a 2-car garage, and the comforting sense that you've made it. But Laurence Kotlikoff looks at that dream and asks a different question. Is that house truly your home, or just a golden cage trapping your standard of living? In Money Magic, he argues that buying a house isn't the smartest financial decision, it's the most emotional one. And emotions, he warns, rarely account for opportunity cost. He tells the story of Michael and Jenna, a couple from Denver. After the pandemic, they decided it was time to settle down and bought their first home for nearly $800,000. They believed, like so many others, that real estate always goes up, that it's the safest investment. But just 2 years later, when mortgage rates doubled, their monthly payment jumped from $2,900 to $4,600. They started cutting everything: vacations, dining out, even their children's college fund. The dream home quickly became a financial chain, and Kotlikoff's conclusion was brutally simple. A house doesn't make you rich, it only trades your freedom for a temporary sense of stability. He emphasizes that a mortgage isn't the enemy, but it's the longest contract most Americans will ever sign, often without truly understanding it. A 30-year mortgage means 360 monthly promises to a future you can't predict: your job, your health, even your happiness. He believes Americans have fallen into an illusion of lifestyle,
measuring self-worth by square footage, by bathroom count, or by school district. But he asks, if you're working 60 hours a week to pay for a house you barely have time to live in, do you own it? Or does it own you? A key idea in Kotlikoff's philosophy is this: protecting your standard of living matters more than protecting your assets. He explains that many people make the mistake of using debt to buy the future instead of using discipline to protect the present. Because every time you borrow to live above your means, you quietly downgrade the quality of your future life. He calls it the financial paradox of modern life. We crave freedom, yet we bind ourselves to decades of debt. We claim to be investing in the future, but in truth, we're just financing an image society told us to chase. He shares the story of Rachel, a 45-year-old teacher in Ohio. She once believed that buying a bigger home was an upgrade. But when utility bills, taxes, and maintenance costs piled up, she had to take on side jobs just to stay afloat. 5 years later, she sold the house, moved into a smaller one, and said something Kotlikoff loves to quote in his lectures. "When I downsized my house, my life suddenly felt bigger." Kotlikoff doesn't tell people not to buy homes, spend money, or enjoy life. He simply wants them to understand this truth. The real standard of living isn't about how much you own. It's about how much you need to feel content. And contentment? That's not a number you can borrow, not an interest rate you can negotiate. It's the quiet peace of knowing that everything you have is something you chose, not something society pressured you to chase. Financial freedom isn't the absence of debt. It's the absence of fear, the fear of losing the life you've built for yourself. In the end, Kotlikoff's message isn't just about money. It's about what we trade our lives for. Because sometimes the real magic of money isn't that it lets us buy more, but that it helps us see clearly the most valuable things we own were never things we could buy in the first place. Perhaps what Laurence Kotlikoff wants to remind us through money magic is not how to calculate our way to having more money, but how to live so that money no longer controls us. Because in the end, money itself isn't magic. The real magic lies in how we understand it, how we use it, and how we protect the freedom within ourselves. If you want to see money, life, and peace of mind through a new lens, go read Money Magic. I've left the link down in the description below. Who knows? It might just be the book that helps you turn money into a tool for freedom instead of a golden cage built from fear.